It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day as a neighbor. Won't you be mine? Good morning, folks. It is another beautiful day in paradise, and I am not being facetious as I say that. God is good, and it always feels great to wake up in the morning and to see his goodness everywhere we go. I am glad to be back on YouTube with you guys after my prison sentence of 1 week. Of course, I'm on parole for the next 90 days. That is typically how it goes. I've got to mute my desktop 1 second here because I'm hearing myself talking. There we go. We have got a lot of things to talk about. I first want to thank the folks at Rumble for their incredible support, and you guys that are watching on Rumble, I want to thank you right now for that. That is a place that we're never going to leave, and of course, Rumble was so good to us as we went on dealing with the nonsense that we have been facing as of late, and it has been really, really wonderful. Of course, those of you already know this that are watching, but we do have our own Rumble channel, our own Rumble channel, and it is James Kaddis. That is my Rumble channel. You can go there anytime. There is also a website called jameskaddis.com where you can go and grab every current video that I'm actually making. So I wanted to thank all of you guys for that. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge our very first super stickers and super chats. I think that's always important to do, especially when some of you guys are as funny could be. And Sir Lewis Cabin of the Burnt Cookie, you are the first super chat. You say, tie a yellow ribbon around the old palm tree. It's been 5 long days. Do you still want to teach? Welcome back, says the captain. Yes, we have been imprisoned. Actually, 7 days, but who's counting? Anyway, Edwin DeGrease, thank you so much for your super sticker. And Carmine Marcelo, you say, God bless you, James. Keep fighting the good fight. And fighting the good fight we will. We are super thankful for everything that you guys continue to be to us. You are great supporters. You are great helpers in this incredible fight that we are facing. There are a couple of items that I want to go over before we discuss our main topic. Perhaps one of the most enjoyable things that I read this morning has to be centered around the fact that the evil Darth Vader is chosen to resign. Yes, Anthony Fauci is going to be gone, and I am looking forward to every moment that we are not around that guy. He is an evil man, but we'll just leave that be, because if I say too much more, I might be able to go, I might lose my parole, and I'll go back into prison, but we'll talk about this on Locals. There's a lot of stuff going on with respect to that, and folks, I got to tell you, the world is coming to a crazy place, right? We are getting to a point right now where things are getting darker. I want you guys to read, when you have a chance, this evil man's goodbye. I think it will prove to lighten your heart a little bit until you get to the point where he actually says that he's not retiring. He's simply going into the private sector. Don't know what he's going to be doing, but I can make some guesses. We'll probably pontificate about that on Locals later after the show. Dale and I will sit down and talk about that very subject. That's a very interesting one. And there are a lot of things changing on that front. Who knows what we're going to be facing shortly? I get letters all the time from people. And I got a letter from one brother that I'm going to actually share later. And I obviously have to keep him very, 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 very hush-hush. I can't reveal who it was that wrote me the letter. Debbie S., by the way, thank you so much. But I want to read this to you. It's very interesting what he says. He says, "Hi, pastors. I thought I should put out the warning. I went to the base to go grocery shopping." This person is a military person. He says, "I went to the base to go grocery shopping this morning as I do every Saturday. Turns out NAS Fort Worth JRB has a mask mandate back as of yesterday. as I was chased down in the commissary by a lady waving a piece of paper and a box of masks. He says muzzles, I mean masks. I call them hijabs, right? When I asked her why, she showed me the copy of the signed order from the base commanding officer. Didn't see the reason, but I only saw it at a glance. Whatever is coming next, it looks like it's about to hit. Thought I'd give everyone a heads up. And this is a good brother. I can tell you this right now. He is very credible. He is someone who served and continues to serve our country by having done what he did for us. And I can tell you this right now, that information is good. So something is a little crazy. Tay, thank you. You say, welcome back, you all, Jailbird. I am very grateful to be here and back with you guys that are watching us on YouTube. This is an interesting one. Now, I think it's interesting for a lot of reasons. I think it's interesting because we are getting near a certain period of time that I'm not going to talk about right now. I will talk about a little bit later when we are on locals. But a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now is not a coincidence. Like, I'm going to just tell you that right now. I think that they want to, for obvious reasons, start a series of lockdowns again because these hard leftists are getting desperate. Now, I'm going to leave that alone because I have a story that I think is much more important to discuss. And it's an article that I'm going to read by a person by the name of Caroline Glick. Now, if you don't know who Caroline Glick is, she is a phenomenal writer. She writes mostly stories that relate to issues associated with the nation of Israel and the people of Israel. And this story caught my eye because it's covering something that you are not going to hear anything about in the news. It is actually a story that will probably make you sick to your stomach. But it's one that I think is important for us to have a discussion concerning. And there's a lot of reasons why I think it's important to have this discussion. We're not talking about a simple sort of insignificant series of actions taken by a few leaders that don't know what they're talking about. We are talking about a nefarious action taken with the significance of the type of signaling and symbolism that introduces sure destruction to the nation in which these people represent. Now, this is a terrible story, but before I read it, I want you guys to understand something. I want you to understand that the United States of America is not in trouble because of the series of terrible decisions that this regime continues to make and has made. The series of terrible decisions, yes, are on a large scale contributory to the demise of the United States of America. Undoubtedly, that is true. But the reason why the United States of America is in such significant trouble relates to two major issues. Number one, it relates to the decision of ungodliness that the leadership and the people that elected those leaders into office have. They support wicked lifestyles. They choose to continue to allow evil to pass and show its ugly face. If you don't believe me, go look at some of the stories tied to the Episcopal Church as of late. It's a terrible situation to recognize what is actually going on and what we are facing from day to day. It is absolutely horrendous. But that's not the issue. There's one other issue that contributes significantly to the destruction of the United States. That, of course, is the treatment of Israel. When a nation chooses to treat Israel terribly, there will be judgment for that nation. Genesis chapter 12, verse 3 makes that very obvious to us. It speaks about it vividly. It gives us great warning concerning these things. I can go through virtually every book in the Bible, almost every book in the Bible, and I can pick up on something that would support the truth that I'm telling you guys, and the darkness continues to increase. It's a substantial problem. So the ungodliness of a nation and its leadership, number one, and number two, the treatment of the nation of Israel. Now, the title of this article, this is written by Caroline Glick. The title of the article is The Strategic Fallout of Flashbang's Failure. Of course, I'm substituting one word. You guys know that. But this is a very, very interesting article. It's one that as I read it, I was shocked because I had no awareness that this particular event in history actually happened. I knew that Flashbang was in Israel. I knew that he was, in essence, visiting the Middle East. That was something that we were all very aware of. None of that should surprise us by any stretch of the imagination. But what he did when he was over there, in many contexts, was not documented at all, not by one person for any reason. And that is terrible because what he did may be one of the single most detrimental acts that any leader of these United States, of this great republic, can do to actually damage our nation. So let me read a part of the article here. Actually, we're going to go through the whole article. I'm going to drop some commentary in because what she's saying is absolutely brilliant, and it is something that we should not take for granted. This is not something that we're to minimize. So let's read what it said here. The argument or the article starts off by saying, arguably, the moment U.S. President Flashbang's trip to Israel crashed and burned was on Friday morning during his remarks at Augusta Victoria Hospital on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Now, his visit to the All-Arab Hospital was the most controversial stop during Flashbang's visit to the Jewish state because it signaled an about-face on America's long-standing support for an undivided Jerusalem. What you are about to hear concerning what he did is absolutely reprehensible. And by the way, this was motivated by nefarious and bad actors at the State Department who have no desire to see the United States of America support Israel. Antony Blinken does not like Israel. The current president is undoubtedly anti-Semitic. I refer to him as anti-Semitic based on the policies that he continues to allow to be implemented. Of course, it is interesting. The handlers are doing that more than anybody else, but it is clear that he and his team hate the United States of America. And we know that they hate it because of what they're actually doing. Look what it says here. It says, not only did Flashbang refuse to permit Israeli officials to accompany him on his visit to the Jerusalem hospital, but his team removed the Israeli flag from his limousine as he made his way to it and refused to permit Israeli reporters to participate in the press pool. Folks, if that is not a state-sponsored act of anti-Semitism, I honestly don't know what is. Everything that he chose to do in this context was designed to signal the state of Israel that they no longer have the support of the United States of America. Now, it's interesting because Caroline's going to mention that in this article, and I think she does it quite articulately. But if you wonder why things are looking gloom for our country, folks, That's the reason why things are looking gloom for this country. It's absolutely terrible. She goes on to say, quite simply, even before Flashbang made the visit, the hospital tour represented a glaring contradiction of his repeated protestations of undying friendship and support for Israel. If anyone still held out hope that the president, who told Israeli television that he was a Zionist, was telling the truth, that hope was dispelled utterly when Flashbang began his remarks at the hospital. His remarks, by the way, were absolutely terrible. Clearly, I think the man hates our republic. And I think the man will do whatever he can to line his own pocket and to help himself as he makes the representations that he makes. It's absolutely terrible. This is what she goes on to write. She says, Flashbang began what quickly became a rambling, largely incoherent speech about how much he likes nurses, hates cancer, and misses his late son Bo, with the most hostile anti-Zionist characterization any sitting U.S. president has ever made of Israel. It's actually very true. Very, very sad. In his words, this is what it is, quote, my background and the background of my family is Irish America, and we have a long history of not fundamentally unlike the Palestinian people with Great Britain and their attitude towards Irish Catholics over the years for 400 years. If you don't understand what I just read, join the club. The guy is a rambler, but what he meant by his ramblings is we stand together against the establishment of the nation of Israel. It's in essence what he is saying. Craig McClellan, thank you so much. You say, welcome back, Pastor James and Pastor Dale. Yippee. We are glad to be here. She goes on to say, whereas the rest of the speech was so incoherent, it is hard to imagine it was anything other than off the cuff. Biden's slander of Israel was a colonialist, a colonialist power was clearly prepared because it was followed by a quote from an Irish poem. Yeah, that's very, very true. Listen, when you start to hear targeting commenting by this man, understand that it was written by his speechwriters and his handlers. It had absolutely nothing to do with him because he does not have the sophistication necessary to destroy the country as rapidly as he has been destroying the country. He has been inspired by others to do so and has allowed them to carry forth not only the decisions, the writings, and the speeches. Apparently, by the way, when he did this speech for really, in essence, all of the Palestinian world, right? Those that are Arabs, make no mistake about it, they did not give him enough methamphetamines to be able to endure the kind of talking that he had to do in reading that speech. He ended up babbling a good majority of the time, which is something that he does on a pretty regular basis. But the reality of it is, he undoubtedly continued to communicate the foreign policy mechanism that continues to disrespect Israel and hates everything that they stand for. Look what the author continues to say in this article. She says, the idea that Israel is a harsh colonial overlord in someone else's land is the essence of the anti-Zionist slander. The false claim that Jews have no history in their historic homeland and no national rights as the indigenous people of the land of Israel is inherent to the narrative, and it is very true. The narrative will continue to communicate to people that Palestinians have long possessed the land, when in reality, we all know fully that there was no right or claim to the land because the Israelis were there first. It's a whole different ball of wax when we start getting into the details associated with it. But it is, in essence, a very, very, very interesting set of conclusions that continue to be communicated by a president that, in essence, has no desire to want to see anything good happen for Israel unless it benefits the anti-Zionist movement. That is the reality of what we are facing from day to day, folks. That's how ugly it's actually getting. It's getting really, really ugly right now, and it's something that we all need to be considerate of. I will say it again. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The nation is being destroyed. The United States of America, this republic, is being destroyed because of its anti-Zionist and anti-Israeli rhetoric and actions, for that matter. Terrible situation. This is very interesting. Look at this. It says the ironic and emblematic part of Flashbang's visit was that even his unprecedented rejection of Israel's very right to exist didn't satisfy his hosts. At the end of his rambling remarks, an American Palestinian nurse from New Jersey proclaimed, "Thank you for your support, but we need more justice and more dignity." I wonder where they stole that phrase from. We need more justice and we need more dignity. That comes from the anti-American rhetoric produced by a series of Marxists who desire to use the so-called social justice movement to usher in a world of totalitarianism. That's what happens, folks, when leaders choose to hate the true and living God. When leaders actually choose to say, we refuse to do that which God has called us to, that's exactly what you get. You get exactly that. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. You can offer the Palestinian contingent the whole world and it will not be enough for them because in the very charter of their friends, Hamas, they say that their responsibility is the destruction of the Jewish state. And they will never be able to achieve their goal until the Jewish state is completely destroyed because this is the mechanism that will drive their success. That is what they say in their charter. So, of course, the President of the United States chooses to make friends with the people that absolutely hate us and the people that hate Israel. And all he's going to do is bring destruction because now he is choosing to set forth a battle before the true and living God. And God will never allow those who dissent towards Israel to get away with their actions. The writer of this article goes on to say, everywhere Flashbang went during his weekend-long Middle East junket, he pandered or tried to pander to his hosts and to key target audiences in the United States. This lady is brilliant. She's 100% right in her assertion concerning all of this. I'm going to tell you this right now. She is not wrong by any stretch of the imagination. When he spoke effusively of his friendship and commitment to Israel and promised not to allow Iran to become a nuclear-armed state, he pandered to Israel's caretaker government and to American Jewish Democrats. And when he pandered to the Palestinians by attacking Israel, he was pandering to his progressive anti-Israel base back home. And during his visit to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, he pandered to his Arab audience and to the national security crowd in Washington when he proclaimed, "We will not walk away and leave a vacuum to be filled by China, Russia, or Iran," although he continues to help Iran by doing what he's doing, giving them cash and in essence, earmarking $6 trillion for Iran over the next few years. even though Iran says death to America, death to all of the leaders of America, death to Israel and all the leaders of Israel, yet he still continues to arm them with this. And I believe he does that to appease a contingency of people that are working with the State Department that have very anti-Semitic interests, as well as very, very, very anti-American interests. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Jigam Brown. You say, can you please explain how the word flashbang refers to the current president? I know why you have to use the word. I just don't understand the correlation. Well, a flashbang is disorienting. If you think about it, right? You deploy a flashbang, it goes off, and what does it do? It disorients the people around them, right? It's causes you to be very lost and unaware, and that's in essence where the term comes from. I had a long pause because I had to determine in my head if it was okay for me to actually describe the correlation, but there it is. Okay, you've got it there. It's bad, you guys. It's bad. And what he did by going to this Arab hospital was way worse than anything anybody could have ever imagined for the country. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. This is even worse. Listen to what she continues to say, and she's right about this. She goes on by saying Biden's pandering to the Palestinians failed to convince them because his pandering to Israel contradicted his pandering to them. As for Israel, the Saudis and the states party to the Abraham Accords, that is, the U.S.'s most powerful allies in the Middle East, this president's pandering failed both because his messages were contradictory and because his substantive policies bear no resemblance to his pandering proclamations. And that's true. Secret Squirrel, thank you. I love that name, by the way. That is absolutely true. That's exactly how it works. His policies are completely different. This is why I continued to engage very openly with people who did not like the former president of the United States. They say, well, I don't like the things he says. Oh, I don't like the tweet. I don't like his tweeting. I don't like his public statements. Well, you don't have to like any of that. He could say whatever you want him to say, but the reality of it is he not only has kept his promises, but his policies were conducive to a successful United States of America. Single greatest contributory mechanism ever deployed to benefit the United States of America by the former president was his treatment and love for the nation of Israel. It's true. This president has completely forsaken that principle. He has chosen to completely walk away. He has chosen to deny completely anything that would be remotely beneficial to the United States of America because, quite frankly, he doesn't care. Now, while Biden left Israelis with a bad taste in their mouths with his anti-Israel pandering to the Palestinians, and by the way, it's really interesting. She puts in parentheses here, and she's right, asking this question as a parenthetical. She says, did he think that by barring Israeli reporters from his press pool, he would prevent us from learning what he said? It's true. She says that while Flashbang left Israelis with a bad taste in their mouths with his anti-Israeli pandering to the Palestinians, Flashbang pandered to and attacked his Saudi hosts simultaneously, which, by the way, is also another terrible mistake. And there's a lot of things related to this, especially with respect to the geopolitical shifting that's going on right now in the Middle East. I think that the former president of the United States, the reason why he was so good to the Saudis and the reason why the Saudis liked him was because the former president had spent a lot of time around people who know the Bible, namely the Secretary of State, who made a lot of his decisions in his interactions with the nation of Israel based on biblical precedent. It's absolutely crazy. Don Diskin Hollow, I'm going to read what you say. You say, there is literally nothing I grew up hearing about that would happen in the end days that isn't happening now. And I know much more now than I did before. Incredible times we live in. Thank you for keeping us informed. You're very welcome, Don. And you are right. We have never, ever seen the kind of world in the past that we are seeing right now, especially with the very type of things that I'm talking about. So it says this, Flashbang came to Jeddah, hat in hand, to ask for the Saudis and other Gulf oil producers to increase production to help him bring down oil prices at the pump, which, by the way, is something we knew he was doing, right? We talked about this. We made a big stink about it. We thought it was absolutely ridiculous how he would shut us down from being energy independent and then run over to Saudi Arabia and OPEC and say, please, 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 please take care of us. Help me to cover up for my terrible mistake. Good luck with that one, especially with Saudi Arabia. Under the circumstances, Flashbang could have been expected to be respectful of his hosts. Instead, he repeated his accusation that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is a cold-blooded murderer responsible for the killing of Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. Terrible mistake. Look, I will just leave it be, but I will just simply say that Flashbang's regime wants to do everything to destroy any precedent that was ever set for goodness and good relations with any of these countries. He may not know what he's doing, but the people around him do. By the way, there are several people that are asking. This is an article by Carolyn Glick, okay? A very, very, very good author, somebody that I admire. I think she does a great job with these. She does a lot of writing on the nation of Israel. I think she does a fantastic job. And she goes on to say in this article, not surprisingly, they refused to oblige and Biden left empty-handed. Even worse, he was politically weakened because his woke progressive base was mad at him for being insufficiently hostile to the Saudi leader. And I think it's so interesting. He goes to have a meeting with MBS, and then he goes to accuse MBS of nefarious action, and then begs MBS for oil to help the United States of America, which is in terrible trouble. What a terrible representation of our great republic. But that's what he does. While the contradictory pandering was sufficient to render Flashbang's trip a failure, even worse was the unbridgeable gap between Flashbang's words and his administration's actual policies. This gap made a miserable failure of a trip into a strategically catastrophic trip. And it was. It was strategically catastrophic. It's a perfect way of putting it. Most of the time when a world leader leaves their country and they choose to go to another country or a series of other countries, the purpose of those visits are to make conditions better around the world through the implementation of a foreign policy prior to the time that they go, and an opportunity for that president to brag about the success of the foreign policy, thus gaining and conjuring up support from foreign entities. I would say it is a disaster when you don't get any of that done, and he didn't. I'd say it's a bigger disaster when those same foreign entities not only don't support you or oblige to your requests, but they walk away from that time looking at you a little weaker. And I would say it's even a bigger disaster when the domestic home front says that you're also without value. It's not a good situation. Little Bear, thank you so much. But that is exactly what has happened here. Folks, this is, to me, this is almost indicative of looking at a person who just wants to destroy it. That's what it seems like to me. Forgive me for saying that, but that's exactly what it seems like to me. It looks like I'm watching a person wanting to just destroy it and having fun destroying it all. Only God knows what we have waiting in the future as a result of all of this. And Justice Flashbang seemed to have no inkling that he couldn't get away with this contradictory pandering. He seemed singularly unaware of and indifferent to the fact that his policies are counterproductive and devastating to U.S. allies. The primary point of conflict was Flashbang's policy towards Iran. And that is so true. It's interesting. What she's saying is absolutely brilliant. What she's saying is this. If every decision this president makes actually puts our allies in danger or makes them worse off, eventually our allies are not going to view us as allies. They are going to view it as a malicious, intentful action designed to nefariously eliminate those people in which we call our allies. They will take it that way, they will treat it that way, and they will act that way. And that creates a huge problem for us. Evelyn Montez, thank you so much. God bless you. Pookie Martinez, thank you so much. I saw that right there on Rumble. I will go back and actually read the comment. I can't read it from where I'm at. I'll read it right here. James, I have to agree with Tom. If Obozo asks Bob Marley to step down, that Mr. Magoo would elect Gavel Mussolini as VP, then Magoo would mysteriously disappear. Scary. I think there would be a possibility of something like that. I do. But you have some significant problems with the situation of Bob Marley becoming VP, or becoming president from VP. That in and of itself could tank the plan of the deep staters and potentially encourage the plan of the globalists. It's a whole other story. And we can talk about that. We could probably talk about that on Locals a little bit because there are some significant issues related to the Bob Marley problem. If you have not guessed who Bob Marley is, that is the lady that works with Flashbang. And I'm not talking about Flashbang's nurse, the great doctor. I'm not talking about that person. There are some big problems that we have here. So Biden's envoy for Iran, Robert Malley, effectively told America's allies during an interview with NPR on July 5th that the administration has betrayed them. Malley said that Iran already had sufficient quantities of enriched uranium to assemble a nuclear bomb in a few weeks. Israel, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Bahrain wanted to hear from Flashbang how the United States intends to block Iran from becoming a nuclear-armed state now that it has its own envoy and has confirmed that thanks to, of course, Flashbang's policies, Iran has become a nuclear threshold state, and that is very true. There is nothing incorrect about that statement. Iran has now become a nuclear threshold entity. Make no mistake about it. That is 100% true. That is not a mistaken assertion. It is completely correct. It's absolutely crazy. Doug McGarry, after the corn pop story, I was like, Captain Crunch, shut this guy up. But this is a crazy situation. They are a nuclear threshold state, and the United States of America distinctly and very surgically allowed that to happen. They didn't just allow it to happen, they helped it happen. And now Flashbang and his regime no longer have the license, the capacity, or the ability to go back and to actually claim otherwise because they did what they did. And that's the truth, folks. That's exactly what's going on here. Again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you ever wonder why the United States of America is being destroyed hand over fist, is going down a very dark road, ladies and gentlemen, do not look any further. It is because of how they have responded to the true and living God, and it is primarily because of how they are handling the nation of Israel. When you become friends with Iran, when you support the nefarious causes of a nation that wants to destroy your greatest ally in the Middle East, which is, of course, Israel, and you continue to deploy anti-Semitic rhetoric, I'm sorry. If you're the president of the United States, you are about to destroy the republic. Because you can do whatever you want. You can be mad at somebody. You can speak terribly against the person. But when you mess with Israel, you are, in essence, as it says in the book of Zechariah chapter 2, you are messing with the apple of God's eye. And I'm going to just tell you this right now. God is going to silence the world at one point. He is going to come out of his habitation, and he is going to find the place of revenge, vengeance, for those that mistreated the nation of Israel. He's already doing it with the United States of America. The United States of America is, as a result now, suffering because of the terrible decisions. It's the truth. Look at how she finishes this. Deborah Upton, thank you so much. You guys are so generous with the super chats. Thank you. Rather than outline such a policy, Biden told Israel and the Arabs that the United States is staying the course with nuclear appeasement. That is, Flashbang told them that they are on their own. And worse, he told Israel that the United States, listen to this, opposes any military attack on Iran's nuclear installations. In other words, not only will Flashbang and his team do nothing to prevent Iran from building nuclear weapons, they will protect Iran from an assault by U.S. allies. And by the way, that is true. She's not exaggerating this, folks. She's not making this up. This is a true assertion. This is absolutely true. So if you really think about it, not only are we going to not stop Iran from doing what we're doing, we are going to threaten any of our allies that choose to, in a military fashion, stop them from building this. But even worse than that, these are the same people, Iran are the same people that hates the United States of America and wants death for every U.S. citizen. If you don't believe me, listen to, just take a pic. You can close your eyes and you can just go eeny, meeny, meeny, miny, meeny, meeny, miny, mo, and find a speech by Khomeini and listen to what he says. Go ahead. Or even listen to any speech by the butcher, the president of Iran. You'll know it right away. You'll understand the hatred that they have, not only towards Jews, but towards the United States of America. And think about this, folks. The foreign policy right now of the United States of America is to turn its back on its greatest ally in the region. The foreign policy is to say we are turning our back on Israel. And not only turning our back on Israel, but actually demanding that Israel justify their actions, defending themselves by disclosing what the rules of engagement are. That's just something that Flashbang just did with Antony Blinken. So not only do you come against Israel with a very anti-Semitic bent, right? But you now are choosing to support the very people who want the destruction of the Jewish state and want you destroyed. Tell me, where does that make sense as a president? Tell me, how much work are you going to get done doing it that way? Then there are the Abraham Accords. This is what she writes. Here too, Biden's pandering, messaging, and substantive policies are not only eroded U.S. allies' trust in his leadership, but harmed America's allies. We know that. Listen, she's repeating something that I've been talking about for a long time. We are destroying our relationships with the right people and trying to make relationships with the wrong people, and the wrong people want to just simply destroy us. The Abraham Accords are touted as peace deals between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, and by the way, Libya, potentially. But more than peace deals, they represent a strategic partnership between the Sunni Arab states of the Persian Gulf and Egypt, which are threatened by Iran, Israel, which is also threatened by Iran. As such, they are substantively and strategically separate, and distinct from Palestinian-centered diplomacy. I think she's being kind when she says Palestinian-centered diplomacy, because I don't think anything that's Palestinian-centered is actual real diplomacy, because by virtue of the fact that the demands of the Palestinian Authority, which oftentimes are lined up with the demands of Hamas, involve the elimination of a whole people group. So I do not call that diplomacy. It's impossible to call that diplomacy. It's absolutely insane. I don't see anything like that that makes any kind of sense at all under any circumstance. No way. This is very interesting. I like this. This paragraph is a brilliant articulation of what really is the case. She says, whereas the Abraham Accords bring Israel together with Arab states based on shared existential interests, Palestinian-centered diplomacy, like Biden's slanderous comparison of Israel to imperialist Britain, is based on the idea that Israel is the enemy of the region, inherently illegitimate and responsible for all the pathologies of its neighbors, including Iran's aggression. The two concepts are mutually exclusive. It's a brilliant statement. It's true. Nobody has a license to blame Israel for the terrible behavior of its neighbors. Israel's actions are remarkably justified on every level, and the actions of its neighbors ought to be condemned in the most clearest of terms. The recent losses that we have had in the IDF, these young men and women that have died in the line of duty, were dying protecting Palestinians, not just Jews. It's time that we start thinking these things through. States that support, this is what she goes on to say, states that support Palestinian-centric diplomacy include Jordan and Qatar. And of course, also the Palestinian Authority also supports it. By the way, I just want to explain this. The reason why Jordan and Qatar are going to support Palestinian-centric diplomacy is because they don't want the Palestinians in their country. Make no mistake about it. When the Palestinians came into Israel, they came as people escaping from these regions like Jordan, Syria, Qatar. So there's a huge bit of politics that's set in that area alone and are not being considered by the rest of the world. The reason why the people surrounding Israel are fighting so hard for the cause of a two-state solution is because they don't want the Palestinians to come back to their country. Interesting where the name Palestinian actually comes from. And by the way, I need to make this very clear. Please do not think this is me speaking against a race of people or a group of people. I'm just simply declaring the truth. If Palestinians want to experience something really, really wonderful, let them become productive citizens and contributing citizens to the Israeli state. And they will do quite well for themselves. The only Palestinian millionaires that live in Israel right now are those who choose to act in accordance with Israel instead of against them. Of course, Mahmoud Abbas is undoubtedly a millionaire because he probably embezzles a good majority of the money that comes in for the PA. So he would be the exception. So it's very interesting how they bring this out. All of these are harsh opponents of the Abraham Accords. So we're talking about, Qatar, Jordan. Indeed, they condemn them. Jordan does not view Iran as a threat. Hamas and to a degree, the Palestinian Authority view Iran as a sponsor and ally, and Qatar is Iran's close ally and partner. By the way, I do want to make this statement, right? Because when you talk about Hamas, understand that Hamas is a Sunni group. Hezbollah is a Shiite group, which Iran are Shiites, yet Hamas considers itself to be a proxy of Iran. Tell me if that's not a match made in hell, right? It's an interesting fact. All the same, the flashbang regime and their policy is to bring the two sides together. How do you bring the two sides together when you hate one side, right? It's absolutely crazy. The first sign of this came with Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to Israel and the Palestinian Authority in March. At that time, Blinken tried to force the foreign ministers of the Abraham Accord nations to bring the Palestinians into their deliberations, and he failed. Darn straight he failed. He failed bad because the people that he was trying to force to make that happen were people that had common sense and had a good understanding of the geopolitics in the states that surrounded and knew that it would be detrimental to their nations in order to do it. Antony Blinken goes home disappointed and more dumber than he already is. And the rest of the nations that resisted it, although they might not have seen it as somewhat of a victory, are wiping their eyebrows, recognizing the fact that they may have diverted a complete disaster taking place by not following along with the recommendations of the anti-Semitic head of the State Department. It's the truth. This is absolutely crazy. Listen to this. It says, but rather than walk away, the administration has doubled down. They have sought to bring Iranian allies and proxies, Qatar and Iraq, as well as Jordan, into the regional air defense alliance that the United States seeks to create through CENTCOM. But bringing Qatar and Iraq into alliance means emptying the alliance of all meaning. Similarly, by the way, you understand why that is, right? Because the alliance was designed to defend enemies like Iran. And if you bring Iran into the picture and Qatar, who happens to be a proxy state in essence of Iran, you eliminate the purpose of what CENTCOM actually does in the region. Because when you bring in the people that you're trying to defend the rest of the nations from, what's the purpose of having an organization that defends the rest of the nations? It doesn't exist. And this girl who is writing this report is brilliant. She is right about her assertion here. 100%. It does not make sense. Similarly, Flashbang seeks to bring Jordan and the Palestinian Authority, which oppose the Abraham Accords, into the summits of Abraham Accord partners, a move that would again gut the Accords and reduce them to strategic incoherence at best. So if you want to peel away your relationship with Saudi Arabia, you want to destroy any relations that Israel has with any of these surrounding nations, then go ahead and keep doing what you're going to do. I don't think God will let it happen. This is my personal opinion. I don't think God will let it happen because we know that the attack of Ezekiel 38 shows that there is a relationship that exists between Israel and all of its attackers, and Israel will be surprised when they do attack. So I do think that we're going to see a strengthened implementation of the Abraham Accords or something like that that continues to cause some of the Sunni Gulf states to continue to speak supportively of the nation of Israel and against actions of people like Iran, regardless of what its cowardly leader in the United States might actually say. Immediately after, Flashbang left Jeddah empty-handed, that's Saudi Arabia. Egypt and the UAE beat a path to Tehran's door, looking to reopen their embassies and formally reinstate relations with a state pledged to their destruction. With the U.S. effectively battling for Iran's team, they need to explore their options. In other words, folks, when the United States says we are not going to stand with you against Iran, And as a matter of fact, we are going to use the diplomatic corps to bring into fruition the things that Iran is demanding, which, by the way, one of the things that they're demanding is the removal of the IRGC from the world terrorist list. And the United States of America is seriously considering this. You're forcing the other nations into having diplomatic relations with Iran. That's what you're forcing to happen. This, folks, is the definition of satanic intervention. All of this, of course, is devastating for Israel on every level. The move Israel has to make is fairly obvious. Israel needs to pander to the flashbang regime just as emptily as Flashbang and his hostile advisors pandered Israel. And then they need to pursue policies that actually defend Israel's interests. Unfortunately, our caretaker leaders, Prime Minister Yair Lapid, who of course was the former foreign minister, right? And Defense Minister Benny Gantz are doing no such thing. Benny Gantz, I think, is an operative in many ways for the left, and in even some cases, maybe even for Iran without even realizing it. Gantz is a joke, by the way, as a defense minister. And that's a whole other issue. Coming from a guy who interacts with people from the Knesset, I'm telling you right now, that's a bad thing for Israel. A very bad thing. Now, for reasons that have nothing to do with strategic rationality or reality, both men are apparently operating under the impression that Israel is required to advance policies towards the Palestinians and Iran that are devastating to Israel's existential security interests. And they're right about that. For whatever reason, Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz think somehow that they owe some kind of a red carpet to the interest of Iran and those non-sympathizers towards Israel, not understanding the fact that they are ushering in a destructive element that could completely derail Israel's national security efforts. This is not a joke, folks. And she goes on to say, Israel has apparently no plan to attack Iran's nuclear installation. My God, I hope that's not true. I hope that she is wrong about this. But she says Israel has apparently no plan to attack Iran's nuclear installations, despite the fact that we are at crunch time. We have no policy to defend or preserve the Abraham Accords. Indeed, both Gantz and Lapid seem to have no clear understanding of the Accords' purpose or rationale. It's hard to know whether their positions are based on ideological blindness or simple incompetence. Both men have demonstrated both, and in similar ways. And I do agree with her on this. I do not know. You know, when it comes to the issues of flashbang, I just think that it is the deep state taking great advantage of a marked incompetence as a result of physiological breakdown. In other words, I think that they are taking advantage of a serious problem with this man's physical condition to use him as a puppet to be able to do the things that he wants. When it comes to flashbang, you will never be able to say that he is doing this as an idealist. There's no way in the world. It's terrible. But you are right about Lapid and Gantz. Carolyn, you are completely right. I got to tell you, I don't know if this is something that is ideologically based. And if it is ideologically based, it certainly does not align itself with, I think, the requisite Zionist mindset you have to have in order for the preservation of the nation of Israel. They are not friendly towards those things. I think it is because of that reason, irregardless for why it is the case that they're doing these things. Simple incompetence could be because they're not making the same kind of mistakes that are being made by the United States, where they're no longer mistakes. They're just simple nefarious actions that are very calculated and cold. It's very difficult to tell if what they are doing is a result of incompetence or if it's some kind of idealism where they think somehow and in some way they will be able to please the world enough, the world who hates Israel, by the way, to give Israel a credible stance in being able to defend its own interests. I don't think that's going to happen. Matter of fact, I know it's not going to happen. I know what the Bible says about the coming time, so it shouldn't be a surprise. She ends the article by saying, but all the same, Flashbang's cataclysmically failed visit, which was followed immediately by Russian President Vladimir Putin's triumphant visit to Tehran on Monday, means that Israel has no time for its leaders to learn remedial statecraft. And that's true. They don't have an option right now to be able to execute some kind of statecraft that would take remedial action with the damage that has been done as a result of the geopolitical shifting that came from some very calculated and nefarious action that was created through the pandering of the President of the United States, who in essence did what he did to purposefully destroy the Israeli state. There's no way to really fix that. And she closes the article by saying, Flashbang's pandering was irritating and insulting, but it's the devastating substance of his policies that is truly alarming. Israel has to stand up for itself now because nothing it says, no pandering on its part, will change America's trajectory. And I hate that statement, but I think it is absolutely true that Israel has an obligation at this point to stand up for itself because there is nothing in the world that America is going to be able to do to fix the problem with Israel. By the way, we have said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'll take it to the conclusion that I think it deserves, and that is the fact that the nation, the United States of America, will be inconsequential in Bible prophecy. And I want to read to you the very last statement that Carolyn makes, and she is right. She says, Israel has to stand up for itself now because nothing it says, no pandering on its part, will change America's trajectory. And I hate to say this, but I think that that's absolutely true. Nothing is going to change the trajectory that the United States of America is taking. And unfortunately, what that is going to end up doing is it is going to bring us to that place that the Bible tells about of inconsequentiality. I keep saying the Bible tells us this, but it's by virtue of the fact that the Bible doesn't say anything about America that makes America inconsequential in last days Bible prophecy. But we are going in that direction. And there is nothing that the United States of America is going to do to change the geopolitical shifting going on in the Middle East now. It lit the powder keg, and now they're running away before the explosion. I don't think that they realize this. Flashbang undoubtedly doesn't realize this, but when he lit the powder cake in the Middle East, I promise you the powder keg was lit everywhere else, every other place. Make no mistake about it. Folks, we are headed towards a very dark day. We are headed towards watching a nation completely fall apart. And we are watching the formation of the last days. That's what's happening, folks. What are we going to do about it? I think this is kind of an important issue for us. I think we need to be strong believers who will continue to communicate the truth about the world in which we're living right now. I think it's a very dark place that we're seeing. And the question that I would ask you guys today is, where is your heart? Where are you at right now with the Lord? Are you walking with him? Do you have a relationship with him? Because if you don't, folks, you are witnessing the world beginning to fall apart. You are witnessing Christ getting ready to come for his church. I'm not a date setter, and I'm not saying that we're going to be raptured tomorrow. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying, folks, is that we are seeing the last day. We're watching it. We're watching it all fall apart right now. I think there's something to be said about this. I think we need to start thinking twice about the world in which we're living. If you have not made a commitment to Christ, it's time to make that commitment. The stuff that she is saying is real. Look at what's happening. The United States has, in essence, almost already sealed its fate by virtue of the fact of what it's done to the nation of Israel. And what it's doing right now to the nation of Israel is forcing Israel to back itself into a corner that might very well require them to want to get even closer to Russia in fear of reprise from Iran. Because right now I'm not watching Lapid, I'm not watching Gantz doing anything that's going to help the advance of the nation, especially with what's happening with Iran. Folks, this is crazy. I think it's going to get to the point where people are going to say Iran is not a nation we can deal with, and the only one that has them tamed is Russia. So we're going to be forced to work with Russia in the region. I think that's what's happening right now, especially if Russia becomes as dominant in Libya as I think they will. There's going to be no other way around this, folks. So the question is your heart ready? Are you ready? Are you ready for the coming of the Lord? Because times are changing. Folks, let me just simply say this. Let me just simply say that the time is coming. I sound like a broken record. Jesus is coming soon. We need to get ready. And yes, there are a lot of people right now that do not understand the implications of this because it is not even being spoken about, folks. It's not, the conversations aren't even happening about this. People are not even speaking about it right now. They're not even aware of it because the lying media continues to keep it from being dispelled or divulged. If they're hiding the truth about all of this, how on God's green earth are we even able to face it or deal with it? Folks, we're in trouble. Time to change, folks. Time to look at what the Word of God says about this. All right. This is where we're going to be going in just a few minutes. I'm going to take one or two questions from you guys. I'm only going to take a few. And then after that, we are going to switch over to locals. And Dale and I are going to sit down. We're going to talk about the Fauci situation going on right now. We're going to talk about everything that's happening over there. We're looking forward to giving you guys some commentary on that. We think that some big things are coming and not in a good way. We actually think it's a very bad thing that's about to happen, and we're seeing it happen. There's a lot of reasons. We already know why this is actually happening, folks. We know why this is coming into fruition. It should not surprise us one bit, but the darkness is getting darker, and the world in which we live is continuing to demonstrate evidence to us that Jesus is coming soon. So we're going to talk about that and a lot more. We are going to switch over right now. Well, in a few minutes, I am also going to post for you guys the link for the actual live show on Locals. And we are working on your requests. I think we've got that a little more rounded up, so we're working on that. Join us over there, folks. I've got the link. I've pinned it up for those of you guys that are interested in it. If we have any questions, it is question in all caps. And then give me your question. I will take two. That's all I'm going to take. And then we're going to switch over to locals. So let's take that. All right. This is a great question from Adrian Scott. The question is, did God assist those apostles imprisoned or killed in any way to escape their fate? In some cases, probably. In other cases, no. I think it goes along with what God's will was for them. And I think that's kind of an interesting, it's an interesting question, but there's so much that the Bible does not tell us. that we just don't know. It's a very, very a difficult question to actually answer. I did notice something that is, I think it's gone. Okay, the question is not there anymore, but let me see if I can find it. Let me see here. We are looking at the locals picture, the locals live stream as we are on this stream, and it is funny to actually see, well, we'll deal with it on locals. That is just really, really funny. I think that's a crack up. Yeah, I always drink from 2 cups. So just for those of you guys that don't know, this is my coffee cup right here, and this is my water cup. All right, so that's kind of how it works. And the only reason why we put a lot of coffee in a big cup is so that it stays warm. I don't drink the whole cup typically, but that's kind of how it looks. Okay, Brad Brun, you say, wouldn't Russia's lack of support of Israel make the Russians not want to embrace them? Actually, no. You have to think about this. The Russians will want to embrace Israel because if they embrace Israel, then they can hold at bay anybody that they want, right? So think about it. If Russia has control over Turkey, Iran, Libya, and many of these other countries that might not be friends of Israel, matter of fact, dissenters of Israel, Israel will love Russia and Russia will love Israel because Israel will praise Russia and help them on the international scene because Russia is holding at bay Israel's enemies. So that could be one possible scenario, but there's probably a lot of them like that. So, all right, folks, we love you. We're going to close in prayer right now, and then we're going to switch over to locals. We'll be over there shortly. I put the link up. I've posted it up for those of you guys that are on YouTube. You can just simply click on the red join button. I am going to, of course, send you the link that you can also copy from the comments page. Thank you guys again for joining us on Rumble. You guys are amazing. Undoubtedly, Rumble is being a blessing because they keep featuring us on their front page, which always means a lot to me. And I do want to publicly thank the people at Rumble that continue to work with us. You folks are amazing. Let's close in prayer, and then we'll move over to locals. Father in heaven, we just thank you, Lord, for this time. We thank you for the opportunity that we have to dig in, Lord, to get into the issues. We pray, God, that you would go before us now, keep us looking to you and seeking you, knowing that you are coming soon. So we love you, Father, and thank you, and we ask these things in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Lawrence Martin, thank you so much. You are awesome. We love you guys. God bless you. Listen, keep fighting the good fight. And we love the fact that our audience on Rumble is growing. Please, please do me a favor and subscribe. We need you to subscribe on Rumble if you have not done so. It is really, really important because we want to build our audience there. If you've not gone to jameskaddis.com, I would encourage you to go over there, check everything out. We have all the resources available to you there as well. Love you guys. God bless you. Keep fighting the good fight, and we'll see you on Locals.